Every man remembers the moment the illusion broke. He thought he was safe inside the city, earning his place, obeying its laws, trusting its priests. The lights were bright, the walls were high, and the warmth felt real. He did not see the cage for what it was. Then one day, it shattered. He opened his eyes and realized the world he served was never real. The city was a mirage built on his obedience. The warmth was borrowed light. The promises of safety were chains disguised as comfort. He had not been living. He had been kept. And when the illusion broke, he found himself in the wilderness. No walls, no light, no noise. Only the trees, only the cold wind, and the weight of his own thoughts. At first, he panics. He does what every lost hiker does. Runs in circles, searching for the trail, trying to find the spot where he last felt safe. But the more he runs, the deeper into the wilderness he goes. Then comes the second realization, the one that cuts deeper than fear. He wasn't lost by mistake. He was sent here, betrayed. The map he was given was never meant to guide him to a home or a future. It was drawn by men who despise him, built to lead him out and keep him out. His exile was the plan. That is where many young men stand now, shivering in a forest they didn't choose, gripping a map that betrays them. And for the first time, they see the world as it is. No walls, no safety, no priests to interpret the silence. Only trees, only the cold wind, only gods. Then, from somewhere deeper in the forest, the wolves begin to move. But they were always there. You just couldn't hear them over the noise of the city. The walls that kept you comfortable, not safe. And now, with nothing between you and the wild, you finally see the truth. You are unprepared for the confrontation. Out here, you either become one of them, or you are devoured by them. And through the fog, he appears. A rider cloaked in shadow, the wind bending around him like memory. The air itself seems to bow as he draws near. You know his name, though you were taught to fear it. They told you he was a demon because they could not control him. They said he would devour your soul because he will set it free. They built fences and called them safety. They taught you that obedience was virtue and comfort was reward. They needed you dependent, afraid of the dark, afraid of the wild, afraid of anything that could not be bought or tamed. But he was never the enemy. He was the truth they could not contain. The Dark Rider comes not to destroy you, but to claim you, to claim what is still alive within you. He does not whisper promises, he breaks illusions. He comes to free you from them, from the comfort that killed your will. He offers no sermon, no salvation, only truth. You will either remember who you are, or you will be forgotten. The Christians will tell you he is the enemy, that to follow him is to fall. But the truth is older than their fear. He is not the end of your story. He is the beginning of your awakening. So stand still, plant your feet, stop running. Face him. He does not seek your worship, he seeks your courage. Because when you do, the forest will tremble. Now, the frenzied wind breaks loose, a furious howl that shakes the trees and tears the clouds apart. You lift your head, and in that sound you finally hear it. Not a name spoken, but a memory awakened. Wotan rides. To most he is only shadow, the storm that drives men to their knees. But to those who can see beyond fear, who possess the courage to face him, face the trials, face the ordeal, to the Herios, he burns. A beacon of light guiding the sons of Europa home. Answer him, and he will lead you through the dark, back to the tribe, back to the war band, back home. Most men today were raised to understand the world through religion. They were taught that truth is something handed down, a doctrine to be accepted, not a reality to be experienced. This habit runs deep. Even men who call themselves free still wait for permission, revelation, or proof. But the old path, what Wotan represents, does not ask for belief. It asks for awakening. Religion says, believe, and you will be saved. The way, the path of kings, says to act, and you will become. One is faith in another's promise, the other is discipline in one's own hands. Wotan's wisdom is not a sermon, but a pattern. The man who seeks, suffers, learns, and transforms himself through ordeal. It is the difference between worshiping fire and becoming fire. This is what separates a religion from a way of being. A religion is a system of obedience. It thrives on hierarchy and reward. A way of being is lived knowledge. It begins and ends with direct experience. Alan Watts once described this as the difference between believing in the sun and seeing the sun. No faith is required when the light already warms your skin. The task is not to repeat what others believe, but to live so truth is confirmed through your own clarity, discipline, and courage. This is where many men struggle, especially those raised inside faith. They have been taught that believing is the same as knowing. But belief without proof is guesswork, and reality does not bend for it. You do not have to believe in gravity. You accept it, because it acts on you, whether you acknowledge it or not. Gravity existed long before Newton gave it a name. In this way, truth isn't discovered, it is revealed by your interaction with it. We did not float away before he found the words to describe what already governed us. The law was always there, only our understanding changed. Truth works the same way. No amount of another man's conviction can make it more or less real. What matters is whether you live within it. And that is the dividing line between the man of belief and the man of becoming. The first repeats what he has been told. The second tests it until it becomes his own. Ask yourself, as Herios, as men who claim to be rising, are you truly transcending, striving toward the higher human? Or do you simply believe you are? This way, the Odinic path demands no conversion, only sincerity. If you can think, act, and test what you know in the world, you already stand at its threshold. Long before men spoke of prophets or saints, there were those who learned to cross the threshold of fear and return with understanding. They were the first who realized that consciousness could be trained, that one could step outside oneself, observe the mind, and return wiser. This is what the shaman represents. Not magic, not madness, but mastery of perception. In every tribe, this figure held a dangerous position. He was not above other men, but apart from them, forced to confront what they would not. He walked alone into storm, hunger, and darkness to learn what lay beneath appearances. When he returned, he spoke in symbols because ordinary words could not hold what he had seen. That is the origin of myth, the language of experience translated into story. It was never meant to be believed. It was meant to be understood. In that sense, Wotan is not the god of spells or ritual. He is the archetype of the self-aware man, the one who looks inward without flinching, who gathers fragments of truth and binds them into meaning. His wandering, his sacrifice, his endless seeking. These are not legends about a deity, they are instructions for a discipline. The shaman is the prototype of the awakened man because he does not outsource his awareness. He experiments with his own mind. He faces fear, pain, and solitude until they become familiar tools. He learns to move through states of being the way a craftsman moves through his workshop. This is not superstition. It is early psychology, philosophy, and leadership woven into one. It is the recognition that the human spirit can be trained the same way the body can, through effort, focus, and repetition. When we speak of Wotan the shaman, we are not reviving ancient religion. We are remembering what it means to be fully human, to see clearly, act deliberately, and transform suffering into knowledge. That is the beginning of awakening. Awakening is not a moment of enlightenment. It is a habit of discipline. The shamanic path begins where comfort ends. It is forged in hunger, cold, exhaustion, and silence, the conditions that strip away illusion. When the noise of the world falls quiet, a man begins to hear his own mind clearly. That is where the real work starts. Wotan's path has always been a path of testing. Every ordeal is a mirror. Pain shows what is false. Endurance reveals what is true. The man who runs from hardship never learns who he is. Yet, the man who endures it learns what he is made of. The ancient initiations understood this. They did not teach belief, they demanded proof. Fasting, isolation, ritual combat, exposure to the elements. These were not punishments, but instruments of clarity. Each trial removed another layer of weakness until only the essential remained. Discipline, then, is not self-denial for its own sake. It is the deliberate training of will and attention, the two forces that make a man sovereign over himself. The body is trained to obey. The mind is trained to observe without distortion. And the spirit is trained to remain still when everything around it trembles. In that stillness, the man becomes dangerous. Not because he seeks power, but because he no longer needs permission to act. He does not require validation from gods or men. He knows what is right because he has tested it. He knows what is true because he has lived it. This is the core of Wotan's discipline, the union of perception and power. It is not a religion. It is the art of becoming a man who cannot be deceived by his own weaknesses. Every man will meet his ordeal, the point where he can no longer hide from himself. It may come through loss, failure, betrayal, or the quiet collapse of meaning. The form does not matter. What matters is how he meets it. To most, suffering feels like punishment. To the awakened, it is revelation. Pain exposes what we truly are. When a man is stripped of his comforts and his illusions, what remains is his character, not the mask he shows others, but the substance that endures when everything else is taken. The shaman does not run from this. He walks towards it. This is why Wotan hangs from the tree. Not to worship death, but to look it in the eye. His sacrifice is not a bargain. It is a confrontation with truth. He learns that the only thing a man truly owns is his response to reality. The ordeal is not about survival. It is about understanding. The man who endures suffering without bitterness, who can learn from what breaks him, becomes something greater than he was before. That is what it means to die symbolically, to let the false self fall away so the real one can stand unguarded. Religion teaches that salvation comes from beyond. The shaman learns that salvation is the understanding born of pain. He emerges from the ordeal with clear eyes and steady hands, not because he found answers, but because he stopped lying to himself. This is the revelation. Suffering is not an obstacle to the path. It is the path. And when a man learns to bear it without resentment, he becomes unbreakable. Every man lives in two worlds, one he acts in and one he carries within. Most men never learn to tell them apart. They are pulled endlessly by impulse, fear, and opinion. Prisoners of circumstance, because they have never examined the source of their own reactions. The shaman's work begins when he learns to see both worlds clearly. The outer world tests the body and the will. The inner world tests perception, thought, and emotion. Together, they form the full field of life, and mastery requires fluency in both. Modern men live almost entirely in the outer world. They measure themselves by wealth, appearance, and approval. They confuse motion with purpose. Yet, when solitude arrives or silence, the inner world betrays him, restless, undisciplined, full of noise. The ancient path reversed this order. A man was trained first to govern his inner world, his attention, his desires, his fears. Only then was he trusted to act in the outer one. Because when a man cannot command himself, his strength becomes dangerous to everyone around him. This is the meaning behind Wotan's solitude and wandering. He withdraws not to escape, but to observe, to measure his mind against silence, to test the boundaries between thought and reality. And when he returns, his actions are deliberate. His words have weight because they rise from stillness, not noise. To live as an awakened man is to live consciously in both worlds. When the inner world is disciplined, the outer one becomes clear. When the mind is still, decisions are clean. When perception is truthful, action becomes just. This balance is the mark of sovereignty, sovereignty of self, not ruling others, but ruling oneself completely. The untrained man seeks to change the world to ease his comfort. The awakened man changes himself, and the world responds in kind. The mind is the last frontier a man must master. Before he can command others, he must first command thought, not through suppression, but through understanding. For most, the mind is a storm, a constant swirl of opinions, fears, and borrowed voices. They mistake this noise for identity. But sovereignty, agency, begins when a man learns to listen differently. He observes thought instead of obeying it. He notices fear without becoming it. He questions every impulse until what remains is intention, not reaction. The untrained mind is a servant. It repeats what has been told. The sovereign mind is a tool. It tests what it believes and discards what is false. That is why Wotan is not merely the god of wisdom, but of questioning. His gift is not comfort, but insight won through ordeal. The sovereign mind does not mean a closed one. It means a mind disciplined enough to remain open without losing itself. It listens to others, but decides for itself. It seeks truth, not approval. It acts with reason, not resentment. This clarity produces quiet strength. It is not arrogance, but composure. The confidence of a man who has tested his thoughts and found them firm. He no longer needs to shout to be heard, nor to prove his worth through conflict. His authority comes from coherence. His words, his actions, and his values align. The sovereign mind is rare because it cannot be inherited. It must be built, one decision at a time, by facing discomfort, thinking honestly, and accepting full responsibility for one's own state. No priest, no ideology, no leader can grant it. They can only remind you that the throne already exists within. To sit upon that throne is to become truly free, and that is the real victory of the shaman's path. Not mastery over spirits or men, but mastery over the self that once ruled them. The gods did not die. Men simply stopped living in a way that could perceive them. When a culture loses discipline, its inner world grows dim. Its symbols become decoration, its rituals empty habit. The divine does not vanish, it withdraws, because no one remains capable of meeting it. This is what happened to the West. The thunder still rolls, the wind still speaks, the sun still reigns, but men no longer listen. They seek the sacred in books and institutions instead of experience and action. Their worship is no longer a dialogue with life, but a plea for comfort. The shaman understands this differently. He knows that divinity was never outside man to begin with. It is the highest pattern within him, the order that appears when perception is clear and life is lived with courage. The gods are not abstractions, but qualities of being: strength, wisdom, love, justice, will. When these qualities are cultivated, the gods live. When they are neglected, the gods fade, not from existence, but from awareness, our awareness. This is why the myths spoke of withdrawal, twilight, and death. They were describing a spiritual amnesia, a people forgetting the living principles that once animated them. And when the last man stopped seeking within, the world fell silent. The so-called death of the gods was the death of man's capacity to experience the sacred directly. It was the rise of belief without being, doctrine without discipline. Faith replaced initiation, obedience replaced mastery. But this silence is not final. Every age of forgetting prepares the ground for remembering. Each man who reclaims awareness, who restores the connection between his inner and outer worlds, rekindles the old flame. For the gods were never dependent on temples. They dwell where clarity, courage, and sacrifice still live. When a man acts with integrity, he revives them. When a people live with purpose, they resurrect them. When a generation chooses truth over comfort, the old gods return not as idols, but as living realities expressed through awakened men. The gods return when men become worthy of them, not through ritual, but through remembrance and action. Every act of courage, honesty, or sacrifice is a spark of the ancestral flame. It is how the sacred re-enters the world, through men who choose truth over comfort and duty over ease. They do not wait for salvation, they live it. This is the real meaning of return, not the reappearance of ancient figures in the sky, but the reawakening of ancient principles in the heart. What your ancestors called divine were not distant beings, but the highest expressions of human potential. Strength disciplined by wisdom, will tempered by justice, passion guided by restraint. To awaken that flame, a man must remember his lineage not in blood alone, but in spirit. He must stand as the continuation of everything that struggled, built, and endured before him. When he acts with that awareness, the boundary between past and present dissolves. He becomes a living link in an unbroken chain. The shaman's task in any age is to keep that fire from going out, to see the world as fallen but not forsaken, to remind others that holiness is not confined to temples or texts. It is in the way a man conducts himself when no one is watching. That is how the ancestral flame spreads again, quietly, through example. One man, one household, one tribe at a time, each awakening another until the darkness can no longer hold. You cannot force this awakening on others. You can only live it so completely that they feel its truth when they stand near you. In this way, the return of the gods is not an event. It is a process already unfolding wherever men choose integrity over indulgence. The future belongs to those who lived as if the sacred never left, because for them, it never did. The highest form of awakening is leadership. Not the hunger to rule others, but the willingness to bear the weight. A true king is not chosen by lineage or election. He is revealed by ordeal. He has passed through chaos and returned with order. Not theories about how men should live, but direct knowledge of what keeps them whole. That is what the shaman becomes when his path matures. A man who has descended into himself and come back with wisdom sharp enough to guide others. He governs, not through command, but through presence. He embodies what he asks of those he leads. Such a man no longer seeks followers. He forms men capable of standing beside him. He does not demand obedience. He earns loyalty through clarity and example. Where he walks, disorder calms. Where he speaks, confusion clears. His authority is not political, it is spiritual, born from the rare union of understanding and discipline. This is the meaning of sacred kingship. The shaman who once learned to rule himself becomes the axis around which the tribe can turn. He balances heaven and earth, spirit and flesh, thought and action. And in him, the two worlds, the inner and outer, are reconciled. Every man who seeks awakening should understand this. The end of the path is not escape, but responsibility. You do not rise above life, you return to it, stronger, steadier, more capable of service. Wisdom that does not act is decay. Power that does not serve is corruption. The shamanic king lives by a single law. As within, so without. The order he keeps inside himself radiates outward. His home, his people, his work, all reflect the harmony he has forged in his own being. That is why the ancient world crowned its warriors with ritual, not vanity. The crown was a reminder that every command carries a price, that every throne is built upon sacrifice. When men like this appear again, those who have mastered their fear, ordered their minds, and burned away the lies within themselves, the world will recognize them instinctively. Not because they demand recognition, but because they embody what others have forgotten. That leadership is not a title. It is the proof of awakening. And in their presence, the gods breathe again. You cannot prove the gods, nor can you banish them by disbelief. They are older than our minds, older than the words we use to name them. We do not create them by faith, nor destroy them by doubt. They simply are. What changes is a man's ability to see them. When the soul grows weak, the divine becomes distant. When the spirit is disciplined and clear, the old presence stirs again, not as a vision or voice, but as a deep recognition. I have been here before. In that moment, the shaman understands what all true men eventually learn. That divinity is not summoned. It is encouraged. It is encountered through conduct. We catch only glimpses. In battle well fought, in work done with honor, in silence endured without complaint. In these moments, something greater looks back at us. We do not own it. We simply align with it, however briefly, and it changes us. This is what religion once meant before it became obedience. A way of living that revealed the sacred through action. To believe in Wotan is meaningless unless you live in a way that lets him be seen through you. Our task is not to imagine the gods back into being, but to become men through whom they can act. That is why I cannot convince you Wotan is real. I can only tell you that you will meet him if you endure. Not in books, not in altars, but in the choreos. The trials of ordeal that strip you bare until only truth remains. He does not appear to those who wait for proof. He appears to those who become the proof. This is the hardest lesson for men raised in religion. You will not find the divine by believing harder. You will find it by living better. Belief is easy. Becoming is costly. So let the philosophers debate and the faithful pray. Our work is simpler and heavier. We must live as though the gods still walk among us, and in doing so, make it so again. The path is not new. It is only forgotten. The woods are dark, yes, but the fire still burns. And if you walk long enough with honest eyes and a steady heart, you will see the shapes moving beyond the glow. The old ones, waiting, patient, unchanged. They do not need our belief. They need our courage. Live as if they are watching, and perhaps for a moment, they will. Until next time.